Some people are not reacting to you, they're reacting to what you represent. And if you don't understand that, relationships become confusing fast. Because one small comment turns into an argument. One delayed reply becomes proof you don't care. One disagreement suddenly feels like betrayal, and you sit there thinking, what just happened? Here's what happened. You touched a wound they never healed. Most triggered people don't look emotional at first. They look defensive, controlling, cold, aggressive, overreactive, passive-aggressive, needy, suspicious. But underneath all of it, there's usually fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of disrespect, fear of not being enough, fear of losing control, fear of being replaced, fear of feeling powerless again. And relationships expose those fears faster than anything else. Because relationships are mirrors. They force people to confront parts of themselves they spent years avoiding. This is why some people can seem completely calm in normal life, but become emotionally unstable in relationships. Because intimacy activates unresolved pain, and most people are not prepared for that. Here's where it gets dangerous. Triggered people usually don't realize they're triggered. They think they're responding normally. That's why they justify behaviors that slowly destroy the relationship. Overchecking, overthinking, interrogating, shutting down, starting fights over small things, testing loyalty constantly, needing reassurance every 5 minutes, turning every disagreement into emotional warfare. To them, it feels reasonable, because trauma changes perception. A triggered mind does not see reality clearly. It sees threats everywhere. And once someone enters that state, logic stops working. You can explain yourself perfectly, and they still won't believe you. You can stay loyal, and they still suspect betrayal. You can stay patient, and they still accuse you of not caring. Because the argument is no longer about facts. It's about emotional survival. This is why some people react to your tone more than your words. Why they obsess over small changes in behavior. Why they notice distance instantly. Why silence affects them deeply. Their nervous system is constantly scanning for danger. And relationships become exhausting when someone is always emotionally bracing for impact. Now listen carefully. Being triggered does not automatically make someone toxic. Everyone gets triggered sometimes. The real problem is what people do after being triggered. Some people self-reflect. Others self-destruct. Some calm down and communicate. Others attack, manipulate, punish, guilt trip, withdraw, or explode. That difference matters a lot. Because unresolved triggers can quietly turn love into emotional chaos. One of the biggest mistakes people make in relationships is trying to win against a triggered partner. Bad idea. The moment someone becomes emotionally flooded, their brain shifts into defense mode. Now it's no longer, let's solve the problem. It becomes, protect yourself. And once that happens, people stop listening to understand. They listen to defend. This is why arguments suddenly become irrational. Past issues get dragged in. Words get twisted. Intentions get misread. Everything escalates. Not because the relationship issue was huge, but because the emotional wound underneath it was. Most relationship fights are not about the surface problem. They are about what the problem represents emotionally. A late reply can represent rejection. A cancelled plan can represent abandonment. Criticism can represent humiliation. Boundaries can represent emotional distance. Needing space can trigger panic. This is why emotionally wounded people sometimes react disproportionately. You're responding to the present. They're reacting to the past through the present. And if they never healed the original wound, the reaction becomes automatic. Now here's something most people don't want to admit. Triggered people often attract other triggered people. And that creates relationships built on emotional volatility. One person fears abandonment. The other fears control. One chases. The other withdraws. One becomes needy. The other becomes distant. And suddenly, the relationship turns into emotional tug-of-war. Not because they hate each other, because both people are trying to protect unresolved pain. This is why some couples keep repeating the exact same fight for years. Nothing changes because they keep treating symptoms instead of causes. And the scary part? Over time, the relationship stops feeling safe. It starts feeling emotionally unpredictable. You start monitoring moods, watching tones, avoiding topics, walking on eggshells, calculating responses carefully just to avoid another explosion. That is not peace. That is emotional survival mode. And eventually, someone gets emotionally exhausted. Now let's talk about emotional triggering and manipulation, because sometimes people weaponize their triggers. This is where things become unhealthy. Some people use emotional reactions to control others. They explode to silence criticism, cry to avoid accountability, get offended to manipulate guilt, overreact to force compliance, become emotionally unstable whenever boundaries appear. And if you're not careful, you'll slowly train yourself to avoid honesty just to keep the peace. That destroys relationships slowly, because real relationships require emotional responsibility. Not perfection, responsibility. Meaning, yes, I got triggered, but my reaction is still my responsibility. That sentence alone separates emotionally mature people from emotionally dangerous people. Mature people don't deny triggers, they manage them. Immature people expect the world to manage their emotions for them. Big difference. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Some people don't actually want healing, because healing removes emotional leverage. Victimhood can become identity. Pain can become power. Chaos can become familiarity. And some people are more attached to emotional intensity than emotional peace. That's why calm relationships sometimes feel boring to emotionally unhealed people. Chaos feels familiar. Drama feels alive. Tension feels like passion. But healthy love is not constant emotional instability. That's addiction to unpredictability. Real emotional safety feels calm, consistent, stable, honest, predictable. But triggered people often confuse stability with lack of excitement. And that's why they sabotage healthy relationships without realizing it. Now let's make something clear. You cannot heal someone by sacrificing yourself. A lot of people enter relationships thinking, if I love them enough, they'll change. No. Love does not heal people who refuse self-awareness. And constantly absorbing emotional explosions will slowly destroy your own mental peace. Empathy is important, but boundaries are too. You can understand someone's pain without allowing them to emotionally damage you. That matters, because some people become so focused on understanding the triggered person, they abandon themselves completely. They stop expressing needs, stop speaking honestly, stop setting boundaries, stop feeling emotionally safe, and eventually they lose themselves trying to avoid triggering someone else. That is not love. That is emotional imprisonment disguised as patience. Healthy relationships are not built by avoiding triggers forever. They are built by learning how to handle them without destroying each other. That means communication, self-awareness, emotional regulation, accountability, honesty, reflection. Without those things, love alone is not enough. And this is the part most people never talk about. The goal is not to find someone with no emotional wounds. That person does not exist. The goal is to find someone who is aware of their wounds and willing to work on them instead of bleeding on everyone around them. That changes everything. Because emotionally mature people still get triggered, but they pause, reflect, communicate, take responsibility. Emotionally immature people react first and think later. And relationships built on constant emotional reactions eventually collapse under pressure. At the end of the day, being triggered is human. Staying trapped inside those triggers forever is a choice. And the people who change their relationships are usually the ones who finally stop asking, "Why do I react this way?" and start asking, "What pain inside me keeps needing protection?" Because the moment someone becomes aware of that, their relationships start changing. And for the first time, love stops feeling like war.